We've only been in this new house for a few months now. The house is out on the edge of town, not many people around, and there aren't a lot of amenities. But the air is really fresh. My room's on the first floor, near the living room, and my parents are upstairs. I picked this room because it's got a big window that looks out over the lake behind the house. I always leave the window open, and the breeze brings in the smell of flowers and grass, which makes me love the room even more. One night, I was up on my phone with my dog until after 2 a.m. I was watching a funny video and laughing when Pop suddenly jumped off the bed, ran to the window, and started barking like crazy. I jumped up and tried to get Pop to stop, or else my parents would wake up and realize I was still up, and they'd take my phone away. "Pop, stop it right now," I growled, but I barely whispered. At first I thought Pop was barking at his reflection in the window on the left. But when I looked again, Pop was staring angrily at the right side of the window. I took a closer look, and it was like a jolt of electricity went through me. Outside the window, a pair of blue eyes were staring right at me. It took me a few seconds to process it all, and I tried to act like everything was normal. I signaled Pop to be quiet, picked up the glass of water, and pretended it was empty. I slowly got out of bed and opened the door, and went to the kitchen to get some water. "Pop, let's go get some water. You like snacks, don't you?" I swear, I had to keep my fear in check just to sound as normal as possible. I didn't even have time to worry about whether Pop was following me or not. I just rushed up to the second floor. I knocked on my parents' door over and over, freaking out and saying someone was lurking outside, probably a thief. "Calm down, Michael. I set up a sensor light. If there's any movement, the light will turn on." Dad was lying on the bed, sounding pretty calm as he answered me in a sleepy voice. When my mom heard my dad's explanation, her face relaxed too, and she let out a big sigh of relief. "Why aren't you asleep yet, Michael?" Mom suddenly switched her attitude and expression. I was startled and said, "I was thirsty, so I went to get some water. Good night, Mom and Dad." I quickly left. When I got back to the room, Pop was still sitting there, intently watching out the window. I went over and patted his head, saying, "It's nothing, buddy. Let's go to sleep." Looking out the window, everything seemed normal. I must have just been seeing things earlier. Pop was still sitting there, and I just went to bed and fell asleep pretty quickly. The next few days were normal, and I kept leaving the window open, just like before. I officially started summer vacation and planned to make a bunch of great memories with my parents and Pop in the new house. With my dad's okay, I'd often swim with Pop in the lake behind the house every afternoon. A few times I invited friends over to camp by the lake overnight, and everything went great. About 2 weeks into the vacation, one night, I stayed up late playing games with my friends. Suddenly, Pop's growling got my attention. He looked toward the window again, his eyes angry, showing his teeth and growling like he was ready to fight at any moment. I took off my headphones and said, "Pop, what's wrong this time?" I don't know why my heart was racing so fast at that moment. I looked towards the window and saw a pair of blue eyes. I stared carefully and kept looking back multiple times. But it was pretty dark outside, so I wasn't sure if I was seeing things correctly. I didn't dare to stand up and check, imagining that something terrible might happen to me. I felt pretty confident because I remembered what my dad said, but I was curious about Pop's reaction. "Michael, are you playing games again?" Mom's voice startled both me and Pop. I didn't answer because I heard noises coming from outside. Looking out the window, I was shocked to see a black shadow moving toward the lake. Pop lost it and started barking loudly. Michael, I know what you're up to. Open the door now. I looked away from the window for a few seconds, and when I looked back, the black shadow had disappeared. I rushed to the window and looked around, but there was no one there. Mom's knocking got more and more urgent, so I ran to open the door and got a tongue lashing. But I couldn't focus on what my mom was saying, as I kept glancing toward the window, and the shadow of that creature seemed to linger in my mind. The next morning, I went to find my dad and told him everything with a real serious look. My dad was skeptical about what I said, so he decided to check the sensor light, and it had been broken for a while. The thought of some weird creature following me so many times really shook me up. I went into detail with my parents about its eyes and appearance, and how it suddenly vanished near the lake. Is it possible you were just hallucinating because you stayed up too late playing games, Michael? Mom's question made my dad hesitate and look at me with a questioning look. But Pop, how could a dog's senses be wrong? I immediately argued back, and my parents just looked at each other in silence and didn't say anything more. From that day on, I kept the windows shut and the curtains drawn all the time. My dad also installed a bunch of sensor lights and alarm bells around the house, just like I wanted. But I still couldn't relax and ended up dealing with constant insomnia. Seeing that my physical and mental health was getting worse, my parents took me to see a psychologist. The police also came by several times at night to search the house, but they didn't find anything unusual. One day, I suggested to my parents that we move to a different place. That same day, the local news reported that they'd finally arrested a thief who had been on the run for months. He'd committed a total of 36 robberies, and what stood out to me were his striking blue eyes. My parents thought it was very likely that I had seen him, but I still wasn't completely satisfied and didn't feel fully reassured. Following my wishes again, my parents decided to fill in the pond behind the house and build a big warehouse. While draining the pond, they found a bag and a mask that thieves often use. So, he probably jumped into the pond to escape that night. Since the pond wasn't very deep and he was tall, it makes sense he could have done that. I slept better and made sure to lock the door carefully every time. Luckily, I had Pop, a big and brave dog.